Okay. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Let us start. Let me remind you what we have studied last time. We reviewed the database design process, and we found that it has two main phases, analysis and design. And we start working on the first phase, the data collection, and we said that it uses two tools: user interviews, interviewing with the users, and use the forms. And we have started last time the process, and we assumed that we are both the analyst and the user. So we have chosen a menu word that we are all familiar with, the university menu word, the academic menu word. So we have identified the entities. We found students, courses, sections, departments, intersections, and instructors are the entities. Then we moved and asked what are those data you want to save about or store about these entities. So we have identified the attributes for every one of these entities, something like what we have here. We moved further and said, okay, what are the relationships that relate some of these entities together? So we found some relationships and defined them in what we call it informal description data model. Informal description of the data requirements, or informal description data model. Now we want to use in this lecture the other form, the other tool. The other tool. Which tool? Which tool? It is the forms. Okay. It is the forms. So let's assume we have a form like this. Let us start with D. And actually, here we have two forms. This is one form, and this is another form. So assume that in my interview with the users, I went and asked him, what are the forms you are using? So he brought these forms, plus this form, and many others. Okay? So I'll take one by one and start analyzing them. So what we are going to do now is to analyze the form at the left and see how to identify the entities, the attributes, and the relationships, if we can, among these entities. So the form is, this is again the real estate company, the Dream Home Real Estate Company. So this is the name of the company, Dream Home. Property for rent details. Let me use the mouse to point. This form is called the property for rent details. So it's trying to describe the form. The form title is property for rent details. The details of the property for rent. So it's going to describe the property for rent. So the whole form is to describe or to tell something about, to tell the data requirements for a property for rent. What do we need to store about the property for rent? So let's study the form carefully. The form is made of many sections, as you see. So first of all, out of this we have property number. So every property has a number. Clear? What else? The property for rent has an address, city, postcode, type, rent, and number of rooms. So it looks like we have identified our first entity in the database. What is it? What is it? What is the first entity we can see out of this form? The property for rent. Property for rent. So what are the attributes for the property for rent? Let us write here. I'm going to write on the board here. So the first entity that we can identify out of this form is what? Property for rent. Can we identify some of its attributes? Yes. So let us write the attributes between brackets. So the first attribute is property number. Property number is a property attribute. Property is an attribute for the property for rent. Property number. Note here that the form, and this is a good point, when I ask the user to bring me some forms, it's better to bring forms that are filled in. It's not empty forms. Why? In order to get an idea what the data looks like. What's the type of the data used. Just the title will not indicate many about the data. So please ask him to bring few samples of filled in forms. So now we have the first attribute of the property for rent, which is what? Property. Let me write this way for the time being. It was property number. Again, what else? Address, city, postcode, type. Again, if you look at the data used in the field, you will get an idea what type means. Type, for example, here is a house. So this gives you an idea what's a type of a property for rent. Yes, it's a house. What are other things you can imagine, or properly you have to ask the user what other types are available. What are other types you use. So he might say yes, we house, apartment, studio, villa, palace, and so on. Townhouse. So we have many types. He will tell us. We cannot just imagine. The analyst is just the role of the analyst is to identify the data requirements. He does not force anything to the user. He cannot imagine. He just record the current status as it is. So he has to ask. He has to ask what are the data types you are using in your database. So in our example here, it's a house. Probably you can get more if you ask the user. So we have type, rent, and number of rooms. Let me write like that, number rooms. Is any other data about the property? I don't see anymore. This part, let me point using the mouse. This part specifies the major attributes, the basic attributes for a property for rent. So let me close the bracket. And then continue studying the form. What other entities I can identify in this form? What other entities? The main entity, the major entity comes from the title. Property for rent. العنوان بقدر أقول property for rent is one major entity type, right? What other entities or entity types I can infer or I can found in this form? What other types? What other entities? So for example, you'll find the section down here in the form, the owners. So he's talking about owner. The owner of this property for rent. Owner's details. So data about the owner. So I guess, and when I ask the user, when do you use this form? So he might say, I'm assuming that he would say, when the customer, my customer, the owner, comes into to our office to register, to tell us, to ask us to manage his property, we ask him to fill in this form. So part of the form is about data regarding the property, and the other part is regarding himself. What is your name? What's your address? What's your telephone number so that I can call you? And then there is an owner number. So I can say that there is another important piece of data here regarding what? Regarding the owners. Let me for now forget this part of the form, the business, because this is a special type of form. So let me cancel this for now. Assume that this part is not in the form for simplicity, because modeling this part is beyond the scope of this course. Which part? Yeah, we will come into that. Of course, we will come into that. But let me write first what we have discovered now. We discovered another entity, which is the owner. So we have property for rent. We also have owner. Right? So what are the data about owner? What are the attributes of an owner? Name, address, telephone, and owner. Owner number. Let me write it like this. O number. Okay. What else? You mentioned something good. What else? What other entities we have? Here, what it is here? It is talking about branch. The allocated to branch. So when the user comes and registers this apartment or this property for rent in our company, we allocate a branch to manage this property. Probably the branch he visited now and filled in the form. There is a branch. Our company is composed of many branches. So this branch is managing this property. So allocated to a branch means that this branch that's at this address, the branch at this address is the one responsible for managing this property number PG21. So we have identified that we have in our database something extra, which is another entity. Yes, exactly, the branch. So we have branch. What are the attributes till now? We don't have in the form except one attribute for the branch, which is, I assume that this is the address. So we have address. When confused, when you don't know, you have to ask the user, what does this mean? Yes, it is the address. He tells me. What else? Oh, okay. We have also branch number. So we shouldn't have closed the bracket. We have branch number. And that's all about the branch in this form? Yes. So a branch has a number and has an address. What else in this form we still have not included in our description here? We have staff. Yes, there is something about staff. So I assume that this company, Dream Home, has staff, and he wants to save data, store data about staff, employees. So we have staff. What do we know till now in this from this form about the staff? Has a name. Staff has a name. Any more? Any other Details about the stuff? No. So this is what the form tells. These data here, these entities and their attributes, is all what I can tell about them from this form. This is what the form tells us. Nothing more, nothing else. Probably another form, like the other one here, or the third one here, or the fourth, fifth, 10th, and so on, the forms that I bring or I get from the user, everyone can add some extra piece of data. For example, another form might tell what are the rest of the data about the stuff. For example, I can get this from another form. But at least for now, this form, all it tells about, this is what it tells. What is here on the table, on the board. Okay, so this is the second step in analyzing our form. What are the entities? What are the attributes of each entity? What's missing? What's left that we have to think of in order to have a complete informal description? See the informal description, remember? What else? In the description we still don't have tables. Tables come at the logical design phase. The relationships. How to relate, or are these entities related to each other in a way or another? Out of this form. So let us take or ask ourselves, take two of them and ask ourselves, do they relate? Is there a relationship between them? Let us try this exercise for every two of those. Of course, the focus in this form is on what? The property for rent. Right? This is the title here. The title of the form is property for rent details. So this whole form is for what? For the property for rent. So the focus of this form is on the property for rent. So probably the relationships will be between the property for rent and every one of these other entities. Otherwise, why they are stated or listed here in the form? واضح؟ يعني why they are here in the form if they have no relationship with the property for rent? The focus is the property for rent. So let's ask how to relate the property for rent with all of these different entities. So is there a relationship between property for rent and owner? Of course. Owner is here. So there must be a relationship. So let us write down the relationship. Remember how we were writing them? Let me remind you. In the many world of university, we can write sections are of specific courses. So there is a title for the relationship. And then we go into the details. How many sections belong to or have related to courses, and how many of the courses related to? We go both sides, right? So do the same for our example, for our form. Let's start with property and owner. Write the title. What's the title? Property for rent, or properties, let me call it for short, properties. So properties, I'll draw a line here just to make a separation between the entities and the relationships. So properties, say it loud. Properties have, first of all, the title. How to relate properties with owners. So properties, and use the plural here. Properties have owners. Have, let me use another color for the verb. Properties have what? Owners. So the relationship is has. In this example, the relationship is has. Properties have owners. Now let's try the details. So we go the trip both sides. First, each property, so we write here, each property let me write property with capital P. Each property, we use the same verb. Each property has what? One owner? Many owners? Just one owner. How can you tell? From the form, the only input we have is the form. Of course, if the user is here in the room, we can ask him more questions. Because he's not here, so what we cannot tell about, what we cannot infer, what we cannot detect, we keep it, we write note, and then give him a call, say, hi, Mr. User, give me an answer to this. I don't tell by myself. If something is not quite known from the form, I have to ask. I have to go to the user. He is the one who understands his many words, not me. I'm trying to understand his requirements. So now, how can you tell? You said one owner, right? How can you tell that? Because there is no rooms here in the form, there is no place in the form to write down many owners, write data about many owners, just one place for one single owner. So yes, يبقى هنا each property has one or more, no more, it's only one. So I ask myself, can a property have no owners? Look at the form. These fields are filled in, which means that there is an owner for this property. The form is talking about a property, specific property for rent, right? If the fields here are filled in, then this property for rent has an owner, right? So I ask myself, is it a possibility that I find one of the forms that has no owner, that has no fields filled in here? Maybe. So this might be a question. So usually I ask the user when he gives me samples. I ask him to give me many samples, few samples about the same form. Not only one sample. Ask him give me 10 samples. So looking at the samples, I can find that, let's assume that, yes, it's always filled in. These fields about the owner are always filled in, which means that, let us translate this into words here. So each property must have, because there is always an owner. Always there is an owner, right? So there must be an owner. So must have what? One owner? Many owners? We said one owner. Must have one owner. Okay, so this is the trip from property to owners. How about from owner to property? Then we write and then think of the trip the other way around. Each owner. We write and each owner should have, may have and so on, may have. So I register owners with no properties. Somebody walking in the street and say, okay, give me your information, your data, what's your name, what's your telephone number, what's your address, and just write it in my database. Of course, I will not include in my database except those owners who have properties. So must have. Each owner must have. Continue here. Must have. Have what? How many?
At least one.
Have at least one. How did you know?
Because maybe
The form here said that Carol Farrell has a property. But when you say at least one, means that I might find Carol having another property in another form. So, reviewing all the forms in the company, I can find that many owners, one owner may have many properties. Right? That's good. But the form here at least didn't tell. It tells that the property has one owner because there is no space to write more than one owner, right? ما سابتليش مكان اكتب فيه اكتر من owner. فعلى الاقل قالت لي من اتجاه التاني. The property has one owner. But the other way around, it did not tell whether this owner has other properties or not. Because the answer to this question will show up from by using different forms, not one single form, many samples. So either, this is a question. Hello, Mr. User, do you allow an owner, one single owner, to own many properties? He will say, of course. I want him to come and ask me to manage all of his properties if he has many. This is logical, right? So let's assume that. So we have asked our user, and he told us what? Yes, each owner must have at least one property for rent, of course. So this is my first relationship. I related the property for rent with the owner. Is there any other relationship among those entities? Of course. Again, usually search for a relationship that relates the focus of the form. What's the focus of the form in this form? The property for rent. So try to find a relationship between the focus and all other entities. There must be a relationship between the focus and the other entities. Otherwise, why they are stated in this form? If the form is talking about the property for rent, this is the title. The title indicates that. The form is all about property for rent. Details, right? So any other entity found in this form must have a relationship with the property for rent. So let us continue. So now, think of the second one. Property for rent.
that is for the
Property for rent with what? The branch. So the question is, do we have a relationship between property for rent and branch? Yes. يبقى property for rent, properties, let me call them properties for now. So properties, what? Can you use another color for the verb? Here is branch. Properties, use the verb he uses there. Allocated to branches, right? If properties are allocated to branches, use the plurals. Okay? the details about this. Let's write down the details. Each property how to relate it to the branch is allocated to how many branch? One. Why? Because there is no more than one room, one place to write the branch here in the form. So each property is allocated to one branch. See, I'm using the same verb. I'm using the same verb, but I'm trying to find the numbers. The one at the property, one property, each property, a property, can use all of these, is allocated to, because I'm using the same verb, to what? To how many branches? So in our example here, in our form, one branch. Question?
There is two branches.
If there is a place for two branches here, then it is allocated to many branches, or two branches, or whatever. Two branches. If there are two places here, then it's two. And you can ask, do you allow for more? If yes, at least. Okay. But here there is only one place, which means that it is allocated to only one branch. Now the other way around. The branch looks at or looks after how many branch? Because I'm moving the other way around. I'm going to read the sentence backward. Then I'm going to use a verb that's close to this other verb. I cannot use the same verb. It's allocated to. The branch is allocated to a property? Of course not. But we can choose another verb that gives the right meaning. So I would say each property is allocated to one branch, and a branch, or each branch, as you like, a branch or each branch. Let me use the verb looks after. يعني بيراعي أو looks after. How many properties? The form here does not show. But of course, if I look at a deck of samples, bunch of samples, set of samples, I would find that same branch, B003, is looking after many properties. And this is logical. Why? Because I'm not opening the branch with all of this stuff just to deal with only one property. Of course, it is dealing with many properties, right? So, and a branch looks after many properties, or at least one property, or let me call it after many properties. Many. البورد هنا هتخلص, let me assume after many properties. محدش بينقل يعني. خلاص ذاكرة تمام. Okay, do we have any other relationships? Yes, there is another entity type that's missing. So property for rent. The idea is to, again, when you are trying to identify the relationships, you look for the focus of the form. What is the focus of the form? Property for rent. Then try to find the relationship between this focus with all other types of entities. Okay? So here, property for rent, we still have stuff. So property for rent, that last one. Property for rent, or probably let me call them properties as we used to. So properties, use the plural. Huh? Staff is responsible for, right? Well, we can say, use another verb to represent this. So properties. Now before looking at the numbers, we have to find the title of the relationship, name for the relationship, verb. Properties are, let me call them, are managed by staff. Properties are managed by staff. Then let us go for the details. If each property is what? Managed by, I use the same verb. Simple. Of course you can use whatever verb, but it's the easiest way is to use the same verb, because you are moving the same direction. If is managed by what? How many? One staff. Because there is no rooms in the form to write more than one staff. IBA is managed by one staff. And the staff managed, and each staff do what? Or does what? Each staff
manage one property.
Yes, manage many properties.
Many properties, yes.
Again, the same question. Hello, Mr. User.
Can a staff
Manage many properties, more than one property? Of course, the answer would be yes, because I'm not hiring a staff, an employee to manage one property. This is logical. So, and each staff must manage, or may manage, or has to manage. May manage. Why? That may means that he might not manage at all. May means zero, right?
No, he should.
He should. How about for example, the office boy? Does he manage properties?
Yes.
No. How about the accountant? Does he manage a property? So not all the staff manage properties, right? So what's the right word to use here? May. So, and each staff may manage. Now the question would be, if he manages, how many? We said one or more. He managed. He may manage one or more, or many. Many. So each staff may because he might not manage at all.
Why is that?
I gave examples.
He's hired for.
I gave examples. Not all the staff are hired for this job. Some are accountants. Some are assistants, and so on. Right? Everyone has his own role, his own function. So each staff may, because the word staff here means every employee in the company. So each staff may manage how many? Many properties. Are there any relationships that could be inferred from this form? Of course not. Why? Because we have related the focus, which is the property for rent, with every one of these other entity types. So analyzing the form is as simple as that. Let us review. We ask the user to give us samples of the forms. Prefer to have many samples of the same form, filled in samples. Why filled in? In order to get an idea what the type is. So for example, when he says property number If this is empty, I would not imagine what the number looks like. Is it 1, 2, 3? But here we found that there are also characters here. What's the length? I don't know. So here at least I can tell that the length is 4 characters, right? It can carry alphabets and also can carry numbers. So looking at the filled-in form, I would tell something about the type, the length, and so on. Many samples. Why many samples? Because the numbers we were looking for here would be, at least I can get an idea about these numbers by looking at many samples. Of course, he will not give you the actual forms, he will copy forms for you, right? Then, having these samples, start identifying what is the focus of the form. In this form, the focus is the property foreign details. Let us look at this other form. What is the focus in this second form? The client. So this form is talking about client, data about client. Of course, there are many other entity types here different than the client, but I'm going to relate them to the client. There is some relationships between these other types and the client. That's why they are included in his form, in the form of the client, right? So, looking at the different sections of the form, I can tell that there are other entities. There are entities that I need to store data about, because everything that's written here by hand is something that I need to store in the database. Otherwise, why it's included in the form? Which means that if I have staff here, name of a staff, then it should be in somewhere in the database. It has to be stored somewhere. So I would say that we have an entity type staff. So identifying the entity types and the attributes of these entity types, then the third step is to relate the focus of the form with the other entities. Again, on 2 levels. Give it a title, give it a name, and then the details of numbers. Okay, questions? The process goes on like this. For every form, I do the same. But suppose, for example, in this form, the second form, the client, we have data about, look at here, data about staff. Seen by means staff, the staff who have met this client and interviewed him or whatever, or give him the form, or the one who is going to deal with this client, right? So we have data here about what? About staff. Also we have data about what? Branch. The branch in general. So we have branch number, branch city. So let us do this exercise for quick. So in this form we have what? Client. We have client and attributes about the client, which are client number, first name, last name, address, telephone number. This is part of the address, I think. This is of the address. Okay. So we have attributes, we have client number as well. So these are the attributes about client. We also have preferred property type. We have maximum monthly rent. We have general comments. What are these? Requirements. The title is here. Property requirements of what? Requirements. Who is requiring these details? The client. So these are the preferences of the client. The client says, I prefer a house in this form. So Mr. Mike Ritchie says I prefer a house, and my budget for paying the rent, my budget for the rent is about 750. That's his preferences, that's his requirements, right? And he has also some general comments about his preferences, right? So should we have this section, although it is written in the form in a different section, but can we relate them to the client? To whom these data belongs? To the client. So I can include them as part of the client attributes. So the client attributes as per this form, the client number, first name, last name, address, telephone number, and preferred property type, maximum rent, general comments. So these are data that I need to store about the client. Then I ask myself another question. What else, what other entities are there in this form? So there is a branch. Branch, what's the attributes as per this form for the branch? Branch number and branch city. I want you to look at the branch here. Address and branch number. It doesn't have the city. By address here, look at the form here, the address. What is the address? It is the street address. It didn't mention the city, right? So, which means that this form requires one extra attribute about the branch, which is city, that this form does not have. And this form has the street address of the branch, while this form does not have the street number. Right? What I mean is, in order to have a database, in order to have a table, for example, about branch, then it has to contain all the attributes needed by all forms, right? Forms. So what I do is, when I'm looking at this other form, I don't look at it separately, but I look at it in light of the other forms. So instead of having a different table, a different entity for branch, I use the same entity here, right? But if these fields are in this new form, yes, I have branch number, so it's here. I don't care. It's here already, right? But city is not, so I add city here. So now I'm sure that this definition of the branch covers both forms. Same with the third form, the fifth form, the 10th form, and so on.
So the definitions should be...
because these entity types will accumulate to compose what? The database. So I'm assuming that actually this is what will happen, that my database will have these four entities, right? Plus 1/5, another fifth, which is the client. Why? Because the form tells that these are data about the client, in addition to something about branch, something about staff, but we already have staff and branch, so we don't have. It wasn't here. The client, this first form does not have anything to do with the client. It's talking about the property itself, not the client. The owner is different than the client. Owner is the one who owns the property. Client is the one who is going to rent the property. Okay? You got the idea? Okay. So homework. I want you to do the same exercise for the client details form and for the lease details form. Lease, the contract. Okay? This is an important part of the course, the data collection. So the first step in the four-stage process of developing databases is the first step and the most important step, because without it we cannot continue, the data collection.
Dr. Every field should be covered. I mean, the monthly rent and payment.
Every field in the form should be covered. Some of the forms are hard to cover now, but when we go on in the course, especially after we finish the entity relationship diagram, the chapter about the ERD, which will start immediately now, you will be able to cover all of these attributes. Some of the attributes, I understand, are hard to think of for time. For example, the date in the client form. What's date? What does it mean, date? So forget this for now, but when you study the ERD, you will know where to place the date. Does it belong to the client? Does it belong to the branch? Does it belong to the staff? Or where it belongs? So some of these attributes will not belong to any of these entities, but they will belong to the relationships. So let us postpone this for a while. We haven't studied in this informal description, we haven't said how to relate attributes to relationships. These are the relationships down here, right? We only care about how many of this side and how many of that side, but we don't care. We didn't mention any attributes that relates to the relationships. So let's postpone this for a while. Your question was a good one. Questions? Very good. We still have time. Okay, let's start talking about the next subject, which is ERD. Remember the second stage of the process? The first stage is data collection. The second stage is modeling this data the collected data into a conceptual model. Model it in terms of a conceptual model. We don't care about which database type we are going to use, but just a conceptual model. And we said that we are going to use a tool, a simple tool, which is called ERD, Entity Relationship Diagram. If you don't remember, let me recall. Here is the process, right? So we have finished the data collection. We said that it is done through two tools: the interviewing with the user and forms. And now we have known how to deal with the forms, how to study the forms, how to write informal descriptions of the data requirements out of these forms. Of course, there are something missing, many things missing in the form, so I fill in or complete them by what? By interviewing, by calling, by talking to the user. So now we have been able to identify everything required about data in our mini word. We need to formulate this. We need to describe this in terms of something more rigid. Thus, this description will be communicated with two types of persons. Who? the one at the left side, which is the user. So we need to communicate our understanding of the data requirements with what? The user. Why? In order to make sure that we understood him properly, that our understanding of the requirement is correct and complete, nothing missing, and it is correct. I really understand the type of entities, the types of attributes, the relationships between them. I need to understand that, or make sure that, or guarantee that my understanding is perfect, is correct. So I need to communicate my understanding with the user, to study it with him and get his approval. Yes, this is the correct understanding. Also, my understanding will be communicated with what? The guy that comes after the analysis, which is the designer. This man is professional. He is a database professional, so he speaks a different language than the non-professional user. The user is professional in his career, but he is not professional. This is the assumption, of course. He's not professional in database or computer science. So the language we are going to describe the conceptual model, it must be simple enough to be understood by the naive user, the non-professional user, and it has to be comprehensive enough, complete enough to be used by the designer. So this is a معادلة صعبة. This is the hard part of the story. How to find a language that satisfies both conditions. Talks to simple, to the naive, and talks to the professional. This is the ERD language. Okay? Questions? So let us go, yeah.
The homework should be solved like you did before. The same way.
Any?
I mean, the homework should be solved.
The homework, okay?
Should be
Do
solved.
the same, do the same analysis. Write the informal description of the data requirements as per the two forms. Let me show you the forms again. This form, the client details, and this form, the lease details. Do the same as we did for this form, property for rent. Okay? Now the ERD. I prefer to call it a language. It's a conceptual modeling, data modeling language. Conceptual data modeling language. Why is a language? Did you notice that I use the word communicate? Communicate my understanding to this person and this person, right? So what do we use to communicate? A language. I have idea, I want to communicate this idea with you, so I use a language. I use Arabic language, I use English language, I use whatever language. So I prefer to call it a language. ERD is a language. Every language has a vocabulary, has a grammar, rules, right? So what we are going to do now is to talk about or discuss what are these vocabularies. What is the vocabulary of this language? And then what are the rules, the grammar, what are the rules governing this vocabulary? How can I express, how can I say sentences that has meaning using this language? How can I compose vocabulary together in order to make a sentence, to make a meaning? Right? So the ERD, out of its name, is composed of two main components. ERD is acronym for entity relationship diagram. So diagram means that the language is not written, it is drawn. And of course we know that the picture is worth of many, maybe thousands of words. So you can describe the picture using many pages of writing, right? So that's why we use a picture. Picture or a diagram is usually more accurate than using words. Out of the name we will have what? Entity, relationship. So we have entities and relation. This is the vocabulary. Entities and relationships. That's it. Remember what we have here in the board. The informal description. It's composed of what? Entities and relationships, right? That's it. So the vocabulary is so simple. Entities and relationships. Of course, it's not as simple because entities has attributes. Relationships has what we call it multiplicity, the numbers. So we have more details. And there are relationships that relate what? Entities together. So let us take every one of these and discuss it. Give you a sample of an entity. Out of this description, let me assume that in the interview with the user, this is what he said. He said the company is organized into departments. This is something different than the dream home, okay? This is another example. Let us call it the company example, the company database example. We will be working out over this course using two examples, the dream home and the company. So sometimes I use this, sometimes I use this. For your information, the company database is coming out of the book by El-Masri, and the dream home is coming by the book by Connolly. If you remember the first lecture, we discussed the syllabus, and we said we are using two textbooks for the examples. Or I bring the examples from two textbooks. Now, let me assume that he said, this is what he said. The company is organized into departments. Each department has a name, number, and an employee he managed the department, manager. Let's stop here and before we continue. So he is talking about what? The user. This is what the user says. So the user is talking about what? The department. He said that in our organization we have something called department. And we need to store data about the departments. Where did he say that? Yes, he said that each department has name, number, and manager. So he wants to store data about the department, which are name, number, and manager. He wants to know what's the name, what's the number, who is the manager of each department, right? So out of this statement, I would say that in terms of what we have discussed here in the board, we have entities and their attributes. We are going to do the same here. So he mentioned that he has something big that we need to store data about, properties of, right? So what is this big thing? Department. We have an entity, department. And we have, what are the attributes of department as of this text? Name, number, and manager. So out of his sayings, out of his description, the user, I can tell or can draw or can write down the same description of data requirements as I did before from the form. So I have, as I said, two tools now, two ways of identifying the data requirements. Either using the forms or using the description, the interview with the user, what the user says. Of course, both are needed. I cannot depend on only one of them. Both are needed. Okay? And the questions in the exam will be like this. Given this form, write down the informal description or draw the ERD. And out of a text like this, do the same. Write down the informal description or draw the ERD. Okay, واضح? So the question comes in one of two forms, either given a form or given a description like this. So at least I have identified a department that has 3 attributes at least: name, number, and manager. Let's continue reading. We keep track. Keep track means stores. We keep track of the start date of the department manager. So he wants to know who is the manager and when the manager started his position, started being a manager. So we can add another attribute now. This last sentence tell me that we need to store something more about the department, the start date of the manager. A department may have several locations. So another thing we need to store about the department, which is the location. And he says may have many locations, several locations. It's not one location. The maintenance department, the customer support department may be located at different places in the city. We have in this Hay Zuhur, in Hay Gama, and here and here, we have many locations at many addresses. So, how can we express this in an informal description? I leave this to you, okay? But let me see how to represent it in ERD. The box here, the box down here, represents the entity. So we have an entity department. Once I look at this diagram, I know that I have an entity called department. We call it entity type anyway, department. Now what are the attributes as stated in the description here? Name, number, manager start date, and locations. So the attributes are ellipses that are linked to the department. So looking at this diagram, I can tell that we have an entity called department and it has those attributes. Just something for quick until we come into that. He said we have many locations. How many names does the department have? One name. How many locations? Many locations. So I have to be able to express this. We haven't seen this in this form. I'll tell you in a minute how to do it. But we don't have. How can I have to differentiate between those attributes that take one value and those attributes that take many values. Many location means many values, right? Might have telephone number. Has one telephone number or many telephone numbers. I have to be accurate. So it's one telephone number. Then I have to represent it in a different way than if it has many telephone numbers, right? To do the differentiation, we use the double-edged ellipse. So this double-edged ellipse means many locations.
So can you write the
Yes, let us write the description here. Let me خلاص امسح. محتاجينه في حاجة؟ عايزه؟ Okay, let me use another. Let me write it. I use the red and write it here, okay? What is the صوت؟ بعدين. So we have entity type, department. What are the attributes? name, number, let me call it D number, manager, start date, manager start, let's call it manager start date. Location. Do we have one location? So here's the bracket. Let's close this bracket, right? So in order to say that this is a field or attribute that takes many values, we use this notation, the curly brackets. So we use the curly brackets to indicate that this location is not one single location. It might be many values, might take many values. Let me also add, it's not written here, but let me assume it is telephone number. Okay? Telephone number. If I write it this way, then how many telephone number the department has? Only one telephone number, or at least one telephone number to be stored in the database. But if I want to store many telephone numbers, then I have to use curly bracket. So what's between the curly bracket means many values, takes many values.
Also the owner, I can, in the first example, I can use the curly bracket for the telephone number, for example.
But in the form it did not tell that.
I mean
if there are many, but in the form it was one telephone number. So we have to be very accurate. You cannot decide on yourself. You have to be accurate. You just describe. You don't design. Okay? Let's stop here. Questions? Okay, as a homework before we leave, read. We have many samples here, many examples here. So read the statements and see how we have done or drawn the part of the ERD regarding this short description here.
Is it available in the body of the slide?
Questions? Thank you.